Max van Praag. This is Private Matters, where we bring awareness to love, sex, and power. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for watching. The show has started in 2012, and there are now about 65 episodes. We took a break in the last 2 years, and we are back full on with new material and new guests, and really happy to have you join us for this this interview. Today, my guest is Bruce P. Grether, and he is an author and an erotic activist. Welcome, Bruce. It's great to have you.
Thank you. I'm honored to speak with you, Max. Yeah.
And we are. I read your book. The Secret of the Golden Phallus, Male Erotic Alchemy for the 21st Century.
Right.
This is the core of your work, isn't it?
It really is. It's the distilled essence of my entire career as an erotic activist to the point of its publication, and it still holds up, I think. Yeah.
And you are an erotic activist. What can you? What is your cause?
My cause really basically is to empower men. I seek to empower men to embrace self-pleasure specifically as self-love, not only as release of tension, which of course it can do beautifully, but also specifically, just to put it bluntly, male masturbation is still kind of a tabooed subject in many places, but I think this is changing. And I think that to fully embrace self-pleasure as self-love is really quite transformational. It's more than just releasing tension or...
Male masturbation, you say, you don't say masturbation, period. You say, in particular, male masturbation is taboo, not female masturbation.
I think that female masturbation kind of goes under the radar more effectively. Of course, women and females masturbate probably about as much as men, or certainly a great deal more than is talked about. But I think that the male ego is a little more fragile and exposed literally in the public light, because men are so driven often with accomplishment and competition and so forth. And I think that there are some very strange conditionings around masturbation, as if it's a failure or it's a kind of a laughable thing or even a bad thing. All of these are really distorted because it's a natural, healthy, truly beneficial thing.
Yeah.
When you use it, you know, and yeah.
Yeah. So, and when you say mindful masturbation, mindful masturbation. What is not mindful masturbation?
Not mindful masturbation, and this is really not a judgment saying there's anything really wrong with that. Not mindful to me is just kind of maintenance masturbation as a habit, because you're horny and you just, maybe you use it to help you sleep. There's nothing really wrong with that, but it misses the potential. It gets a little more nuanced than this, because I do think that sometimes if somebody's habitually looking at porn all the time or fantasizing obsessively, this can take it into a realm that is not so mindful, that is really literally just kind of an obsessive mental exercise. Mindfulness, ironically, the term really means being fully present. And when I say mindful masturbation, I mean paying full attention to what is actually happening here and now in your own body, what you are feeling and what you are doing, and how this is affecting you. So it's not a judgment, but I think a lot of masturbation that men do still is not all that mindful, because it's often obsessively...
Well, right. And in particular, when people watch porn and their attention is out there on the laptop, on the computer, their attention is not in their bodies. That's also what you're saying.
Often that's the case, yes. And in fact, it's often, I mean, I'm not really judging that as bad. There's nothing wrong with pornography morally as long as nobody's harmed. But I think what happens too is men often get very stuck in a repetitive pattern where they're clicking from one arousing image to another. Their particular arousal buttons that arouse them, and they're often just sitting there kind of pumping away on their penis in a very mechanical way, and they may be feeling a lot of pleasure, but it's kind of static. It gets stuck. I mean, I've done this myself, I know, and I also observe it in many men. Whereas with truly, what I call truly mindful masturbation, it can be an incredibly enriching, diverse, creative, flowing process that is very different, very different.
So
Very
what would you say is the purpose of the masturbation? Pleasure?
Absolutely, that is a primary purpose of it. But I also think that masturbation, particularly when it is taken into what I call a mindful realm, is not only very nourishing on many levels, but can actually be very valuable psychologically. It can improve your self-esteem. It can be a way of exploring consciousness. It can expand your awareness and actually, I think, lead you to greater balance and wholeness and happiness in your life. This is not to say it's better than other forms of erotic experience, or that it's not a replacement. It's not better or worse. To me, it's simply a different category, and it's extremely valuable when you embrace it consciously.
What are the risks? I remember once reading, it's like so many books about sex. My whole house is filled with books about relationship and sex.
Sure.
I remember reading once, the masturbation is really good, and if you did it for too long, too much, without having actual sexual contact with another human being, then you could get stuck in a particular mode that's not necessarily helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think that the problem with that kind of thinking is that it's partly that there is an old belief that masturbation might be kind of antisocial. It'll cut you off from other people. And this is kind of an outmoded thing, because for one thing, there's the new concept of the solosexual, who is choosing masturbation as a primary source of erotic pleasure, sometimes the primary source. But the interesting thing is, in today's internet world, we're really learning how this can be shared also. Video conference online, there are actually summit meetings where men go to camps and they masturbate together. So it can be a social activity, but there's kind of, to me, there's a qualitative difference. Masturbation, male masturbation in particular, I consider really a kind of a pure-hearted, innocent thing, in essence, which might sound strange to some people at first, but I think that's because it is possible in the masturbation realm to kind of bypass the ego games and the power games that are often part of sexual interactions with other people in other ways. When it moves to oral sex and anal sex, nothing wrong with those, but they're different.
No, nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with power.
No, nothing wrong with power either. But
because if your turn on has to do with the power dynamic, then you don't get that in the masturbation, and you may actually get an extra dimension once you are with someone.
You might. I think you can still have power, because there are like coaching daddies. There's milking daddies who I like to tie people up and tell them what to do, or them when they're actually in bondage, and you definitely have a power dynamic there. But I guess I kind of relate to the spiritual and the Wiccan idea of how powerful it is to have power with rather than power over. In other words, my work is, and that I'm not claiming to be comprehensively, something that works for everybody all the time, but I think that it's about empowering people to claim their own power, and it's power over your own choices and your own self. For example, how much pleasure do you want? How much can you possibly stand to have? And that's a frontier that the men I masturbate with online and that I coach, we're constantly exploring this. They call it edging, but there's way beyond edging, is what I call mindful masturbation and male erotic alchemy, where this is pushed to really kind of to an extreme compared to how, if somebody masturbates for 10 or 15 minutes and ejaculates, and then they go to sleep or they do something else, or they shift their attention to something else, that's not wrong, but it's missing this enormous potential for altering consciousness and personal growth.
Okay.
That is available through these practices, I mean, specifically, and I'm talking about the practice of mindful masturbation, what I call
Yes,
it.
and you are a messenger for that. You're a messenger for men to bring more self-acceptance and consciousness to
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. Because out for me, and I, I've gotten a reputation around that. And I think that it's interesting how this is still kind of a cutting edge realm too. I am completely masturbation friendly. The reason I talk about men is because that's what I know from my own experience. I think possible women are way ahead of men in some ways in terms of claiming, erotic power and masturbation. But I'm really, really focused on empowering men specifically, and specifically with self-pleasure, because I think this is a realm in which most men sense there's something very powerful there because they've experienced it, but they often need coaching or very specific information to push it further.
So if a man comes to you and says, well, Bruce, I really don't masturbate. I really need another person there, a man or a woman, or a strong fantasy. I cannot generate the pleasure just from myself. Then you want to work with them or not?
I'm happy to work with them. I think that what they're doing is they're creating their own conceptual bubble. They're creating a filter bubble, and they may or may not be able to break through that. I think it's entirely possible that they're actually defining a boundary that doesn't have to be there. I can't say for sure. I mean, I do encounter that often. I mean, I'll encounter men who love to masturbate, and they'll say, well, but I'm straight and I have a girlfriend, so I don't masturbate, and I think, well, whatever works for you, but the reality is too, I've studied sexuality for consciously for 25 years now on a pretty intense level. And I know that virtually all men masturbate unless they have a health issue or they have a serious psychological problem with it. Virtually all men masturbate. But what's really exciting to me and cutting edge and wonderful is how this is becoming more of a conscious process for so many people to explore the potentials. This is like having, your human body is like having a beautiful advanced starship, and if you just do maintenance masturbation, it's like using it to go to the corner convenience store to get a few things, If you're not really, really, willing to look at the whole power of what is there. And it is powerful. It's powerful.
It's powerful, yes.
Absolutely. I mean,
it's very powerful. Now, the man who says, yeah, I'm not masturbating, I would tell him, how can you expect that someone else can pleasure you if you can't pleasure yourself?
It's a very good point. And very often he's saying that simply because he has been conditioned to think that there's something diminishing about saying, I love to masturbate. And there's a wonderful new tendency I've just seen mainly in the last few years of more and more men who are claiming solo sexuality as an identity of pride too. Saying, I actually like to masturbate better than any other form of erotic pleasure. Many men are saying that now more openly and more proudly because they're realizing that when you claim solo sexuality as a primary form of pleasure and an important part of your lifestyle, you decide. It's entirely up to you how much pleasure you'll experience. And these kind of men are often experiencing more pleasure than many other people will ever experience in their whole life.
Wow. How did you come to this work, Bruce? Did masturbation save your life, or is that a little extreme?
It changed my life.
It changed your life. Okay.
Because I always loved to masturbate since I was, I was at the beginning of puberty when I really figured out how to do it deliberately. I always liked to, press things between my legs and climb trees and stuff like that and get off on it. But I'll tell you, through a large part of my adult life until I was in my early 40s, I masturbated every day, usually several times a day, and I ejaculated before too long. It wasn't that I couldn't sustain it at all, but I really began to suspect in my 30s that there had to be more to this. I checked out books on Tantra and Taoist sexuality, but they were all kind of murky and obscure. They made this sound so difficult and, oh, this is forbidden knowledge that might not be safe to reveal and so forth. And then finally, I have to be forever grateful to my dear friend, Joseph Kramer, for producing a particular video. He's done a lot of great videos, but Fire on the Mountain is his video on male genital massage, which I when I first encountered this, just before I met Joseph for the first time, I embraced it, but applied it to myself. At the time, I didn't have any playmates to play with. You know, now I have a lot of playmates, particularly online and you know, coaching clients. So it's very exciting to me how many men now are coming to me and asking to learn this. It's essentially very simple, but it takes very specific willing.
What was the message from Fire on the Mountain, the Joseph Kramer's movie? And
Yeah.
I am a big fan of Joseph Kramer's work. He's a wonderful man, a trailblazer in the field of erotic somatic work.
Absolutely. I would say the message of Fire on the Mountain is that you can have enormous amounts of pleasure if you learn that ejaculation and orgasm are not one and the same. That you're able to, and this is what most of us get the wrong impression in our teens. When we're in our puberty, for the first time, we begin to ejaculate and have incredible orgasms as our bodies are maturing into adult bodies. But we get the mistaken notion that orgasm and ejaculation are the same for a man. And Joseph learned, because he was practicing the Taoist cultivation method, which actually avoids ejaculating.
Mm-hmm.
And those days, this was in the 80s, it was partly a safety matter at the time. This opened the door to limitless pleasure, really. And I'll tell you, this is what changed my life, was that I wanted to be able to experience so much pleasure for so long that I could just observe it and kind of be with it, instead of like just going through it and then it's over and like, oh, I can't wait till I get an erection again. That would be great, because now I learned that I can have limitless amounts of pleasure if I take responsibility and I choose not to ejaculate so often, because ejaculation is fantastic. I'm not opposed to it in any way, but it tends to be the end of pleasure for now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Whereas if you choose not to ejaculate, you can take yourself to places.
I understand that. I learned from Montauk Chia and very valuable lessons and practices about cultivating more staying power and using the sexual energy for your well-being, for your whole aliveness.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a teenager and I started masturbating, I noticed that it became a habit to masturbate every evening to soothe myself.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was dealing with anxiety and depression already as a teenager, and it was kind of a way to calm myself. And I remember as a teenager being concerned about it and speaking with my father. I have a wonderful father. He could speak about all those things. I could just ask him about it. And I was concerned that I was doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah, and there's really nothing wrong with that. In fact, what happens is there are two basic parts to your nervous system. That one is the fight or flight reflex. These are literally physical parts of it. The other is the relaxation response. And in the relaxation response is where your erections normally happen. So in other words, if you're crossing a busy street, even if you have an erection in your pants, a car almost runs you down, you're going to probably lose your erection very quickly because it's not going to help you survive at that moment. But when you learn to, for example, mindful masturbation is about keeping yourself in that relaxation response. So that's why I start with breathing and relaxing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Keeping your arousal will be more sustainable and more intense if you are able to keep yourself in that relaxation response. And it becomes...
So some people might use the sexual activity to get into their body, but what you're saying, you first need to be in your body.
It helps. That's exactly what mindfulness is about being in your body. And of course, what happens is you're generating all kinds of beautiful neurochemicals in your brain and your nervous system, and hormones that are, it's serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine, these wonderful things that make you feel good, make you feel energetic, but peaceful and more relaxed too. You might feel quite alert and yet serene, when you're done with a mindful masturbation session, which you may or may not choose to ejaculate. But if you do ejaculate following, much more sustained and artful masturbation, you're still going to keep more of the energy in your body than you do if you just, 5 or 10 minutes of quick, I used to do that quite often when I was a lot younger. But I've just learned that this is a great gift, to have this innate power, the endogenous chemistry that we can create this way in our bodies. And we can share it with other men who are willing to, practice something similar with us. So I think what happens too is that there's a hormone called progesterone, which has become more aware of how that can be a kind of a bonding and a socializing thing that I think that happens when men masturbate together, whether it's I think it happens when you do it online. An awful lot of what I do is through video conferencing when I'm coaching or sharing with men. And it's probably a major unforeseen...
What about in your workspace or your home, teaching a class in a circle, and would everybody masturbate together?
Mm-hmm. I've done that in the past. I'm not offering any live events right now, but yeah, definitely. I talk about, my DBA, for example, is called Brotherhood of Men. And if it wasn't something I had to file at the county clerk house, it would have been the Phallic Brotherhood of Men. I didn't really want to draw attention to that because I'm very open in the work I do, but I also don't want to throw it in people's faces or,
Sure.
Everything legally. I have a website where there's an age identification as you go in, and there are free instructional videos that are explicit and I think very beautiful. A young friend of mine created a lot of videos of himself, and they're instructional and inspirational. So I think we've really done something remarkable by combining the erotic and the instructional together, with my young friend Blue Tiger.
But does it have to be a solo practice? Are you familiar with the orgasmic meditation, which is about a woman receiving? What if the men were to receive stroking?
Oh, absolutely. But then that becomes erotic massage. Either that, or sometimes it is, Max, sometimes it is just sharing masturbation by... there's not an absolute boundary there, but what Joseph shares so brilliantly in many forms is erotic massage, and he includes, same-sex couples of men and women and heterosexual relations and so forth. And it's wonderful how inclusive he is, but I've kind of kept my focus on what I know from experience, which is male masturbation. And that can be shared very powerfully. Yes. There's not an absolute dividing line between erotic massage and sharing masturbation, because between two men, erotic massage is in a sense, sharing masturbation, perhaps.
It's a different thing. Yeah. So how we feel about our penis is very important. And you probably discussed this with your students.
Absolutely. Yes. In fact, that's what the primary thing. I think the first line of my book that I wrote, Joseph wrote a really nice introduction to the book. And I think the first line of my book is something like, this book is really about one thing: your relationship with your penis. my book about the Golden Phallus, because it really is, you know, this is, I think, what is kind of missing for so many men is the penis is either ridiculed as silly, or, you know, oh, you think with your penis, or it's terrible, it's a bad thing, you know, it's the devil's tool or whatever. I mean, very distorted and twisted and extreme views, whereas it is, to me, it is a beautiful and sacred and powerful thing. It's more comparable to the wizard's staff or the magician's wand, you know. I mean, what do you think Harry Potter was really learning all those years at Hogwarts? You know, I mean, you know, he and his little friend Ron Weasley may have, you know, there may be things we don't.
Okay, what if I'm a guy and I come to you, Bruce, and I want to enhance the size?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of exercises will you prescribe?
Primarily self-acceptance, accepting yourself as you are. What I've dealt with this a lot in my career. There is not a safe surgical or pharmaceutical or medical way a safe way to enlarge your penis without courting damage or dysfunction. There is a set of kind of stretching exercises that supposedly comes from the Arab world called jelqing. And I'll tell you, if you want to increase the size of your penis, experience erection as much as you can, because your penis is very elastic. You know, it will stretch, and it'll even hang bigger if you masturbate quite a bit or have sex quite a bit. You know, I urge people, if you're not having sex a lot, and many people think about sex or talk about it or obsess with it more than they actually experience it, but there's no reason not to enjoy a lot of pleasure through masturbation too. And your penis will be functionally bigger if you are masturbating quite a bit and pushing yourself into those high erotic states I talk about for longer times. You know, it'll stretch to its maximum, and there isn't a good, okay, here enlarge your penis. You know, our penis is magical and powerful and beautiful, but they vary a lot, as we know. You know, and the more you see them, the more you realize, you know, no two are the same. Some people say all penises are alike. I completely disagree. No more than all faces are alike. I mean, you and I both have a nose and eyes and mouth, but, you know, we're very individual, and so are penises. And I say accept and you know, try to focus on the gratitude for the incredible pleasure it can give you, whether it's bigger or smaller. So many men think it's smaller than it is because they look down at their body, and it's a matter of perspective. Oh, it's far away. Try photographing yourself from between your legs. Get your laptop or your phone down there, you know, and your penis will look huge. I mean, people think mine is big, you know. It's, well, you know, it may be a little bigger than average, but it's not gigantic like some people think, you know.
I mean, you just hit the nail on the head, or the penis on the head. I don't know how to say it. It's, if you use it, if you don't use it, you lose it. I remember Mantak Chia saying once, he was explaining that people in the West, I mean, with this funny accent, which I'm not going to imitate here.
It's Thai.
People in the West think that in order to be more sexy, they have to go to the gym a lot and work out. But really, the way to feel more sexy is to use the sexual organ. Go to the bathroom 3 times a day, massage your penis, massage your balls, massage your breasts.
Absolutely. You know, I can remember I usually masturbated every day. At least sometimes a lot more, sometimes not quite as much if I'm busy with stuff. But I can remember there have been a few periods in my adult life when I got kind of distracted, you know, and for a matter of days or even a week or so, I wasn't masturbating very much. And I realized there's a lot to that, you know, and I consciously decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and masturbate, you know. And it was like a reunion with that organ. And I thought, yeah, you know, I've encountered men who feel their penis permanently shrank because, you know, they had some kind of instance of grief and loss, and they were depressed. And for several years, they didn't masturbate. They didn't have sex at all. and they felt it permanently shrank. I think that's possible, but I also know men who got distracted with like having to care for somebody, a partner or a spouse, and they didn't masturbate, and then all of a sudden when they had an opportunity to, it really came back a lot too. So I think it's something where you should never give up. I deal with men, from men who are in their early 20s to men who are in their 80s, uh, and there's no reason it can't even go beyond that at both extremes, that men can really enjoy. But
Right.
you
Okay.
know, there's no
People struggling with impotence. You will explore with them how this, what the cause is, which could be psychological mostly, and
yes,
most of the time it's not physical, but it's psychological. There's a block to their turn on. They're not connected to what turns them on. They feel shame or guilt, whatever, or trauma. I mean, PTSD. There's so many ways
yeah.
we can shut down in that arena. So you work with all of that.
I do sometimes, yes, and what I think is though is the really beneficial thing is when you are able to give yourself permission to, you get a toe in the door of, yeah, I love pleasure and I give myself permission to experience pleasure, and then when you keep pushing that and increase the amount of pleasure that you give yourself, I seriously believe that it's not like therapy or healing in any ordinary sense. What happens is the ecstasy itself becomes really beneficial and helps you.
Mm.
It's like yoga, they talk about the chakras. This chakra is blocked or that chakra is blocked. The way to unblock them is to just get that energy flowing through your body. Whenever you are aroused and experiencing what I call pure penis pleasure, the signals are traveling tremendously between the base of your spine and your head, and your heart is opening too, because literally your heart is in the middle of all that traffic. This is all, the nervous system is all totally connected, and it's literally the ecstasy itself does a lot of work on, I think it's, actually I've heard Joseph, say that Joseph Kramer has said that he feels that, an awful lot of therapy, people could benefit more from just learning to masturbate more skillfully than from years of talk therapy or drug therapy. And I agree with that
Very
totally.
good.
I see
Very
this
good.
all the time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Bruce. Um, uh, Anything else you want to say to the viewers that about masturbation that we haven't covered?
Well, if a man is intrigued by any of the things that you and I have discussed, and you have a lot of this in your own background already, and an awareness that you have, Max, if a man is intrigued by any of this, I say please just come. He's welcome to come to my website, which is eroticengineering.com. It's one word, and there is there's an about page and a welcome page, and there are free video courses. There are actually 10 free video courses. I offer coaching too, and I charge for clients who can afford it, and then sometimes I can work with people. I'm supporting the site pretty much myself, and I get some donations, but I'm doing this because I completely believe in it, Max. This is my life's work, along with, I'm a novelist, and you can probably tell I can talk all day. But with my novels, I'd rather just get it all into the keyboard. And with this erotic work, it's really my mission and my passion in life too. Besides the writing, this is my primary. I feel
That's wonderful. Yes, I think many men need to be able to get out of isolation with their masturbation and talk to a mentor and learn more about their body and what it's able to do and empower themselves through these practices. So thank you for the work you're doing, Bruce.
thank you
and people can find you on eroticengineering.com. This will also be on the subline of the video.
Yes, great. And there is a website where every week I have a new column, and this is not really my ego speaking, but they call me the bait master there, and I guess I earned that title. Some people call me a masturbation guru, but there is a site called baitworld.com too, which I suggest men who are really interested in masturbation check it out. It's not just primarily mindful masturbation, but it's about masturbation, and that's the only real subject of the site. People can share their photos and their videos, and they can connect socially. On my site, I can definitely, there's a contact. Men can get in touch with me, and I'm happy to connect with them and, you know, talk with them and so forth. But Bait World is also a great context in which men who are really, you know, deeply interested in masturbation can connect with other men. So
yeah, let's steer them first to you. And
yes.
yeah, thanks, Bruce, for being here. This is going to be the end of our chat today. Maybe we'll do more in the future. Great to know you. Great to know about your work.
You bet.
And to my viewers, thank you for watching.
Yeah, that book is on Amazon, folks. I'm not doing that just to promote my book sales, but also because I think it's really changed many men's lives. I hear from men every day who have either read that or gone to my site, and I'm honored. I never set out to help a lot of men, but I think a lot of men are benefiting, so I feel great about that.
All right. I am Max van Praag. This was Private Matters. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time.